Hello, welcome to the channel Why Stories. Enjoy watching.
Are you crazy? Bringing a child to work. This is not a daycare or an orphanage. Solve your problems on your own. Natalia listened to this tirade without being able to say a word. She suspected that bringing her son to work wouldn't be welcomed by her coworker. "I'm sorry," muttered Natalia when Victoria calmed down a little and fell silent. "You know that I have no one to leave Adrian with. Teodora is sick, and I can't take my son to kindergarten with our schedule. I had no choice but to bring him here." Victoria gave the little boy such an icy glance that he shrank back and hid behind his mother. "Is he sick?" the woman asked suspiciously. "But I guess there's no reason to ask. Children always get sick, and I don't need a runny nose and cough right now. I have vacation in a week." "My son is not sick," Natalia said calmly. "And he won't bother you. You won't even notice him. Right, Adrian?" The boy nodded. He looked so scared at Victoria that Natalia felt sorry for him. Leaving him in the company of an angry coworker was cruel, but she had no other choice. She needed to clean the rooms on the second floor. But she couldn't take her son there. The homeowner might notice the uninvited guest and fire her. Natalia had worked so hard to get this job, and being fired would be the final blow. She sat her son down by the window at the table where Laura the cook usually chopped salads. She gave him a drawing album, colored pencils, and smiled. "Be a good boy and don't make noise. Don't disturb Victoria while she works, and I'll be back soon. Can you draw our cat for me?" "Yes," the boy whispered. "That's my boy," Natalia said. Adrian seemed so frightened that it was clear he wouldn't move or make a sound in his mother's absence to avoid this woman at the sink getting angry again. Natalia glared at Victoria, wondering why she couldn't be a little kinder to the child. Whatever faults Natalia might have had, taking out her anger on the boy was wrong and simply foolish. How unfortunate that Laura had taken the day off. The elderly cook would not have tormented the child and surely would have found something to keep him occupied. Victoria scrubbed the sink with such force that it seemed she wanted to wear a hole in it. Natalia waved to her son and left. She had to finish her work quickly and return to the kitchen. The woman felt that this wouldn't end well. On that day, she began cleaning with an unprecedented enthusiasm, first vacuuming the room of the homeowner Salvador. Natalia always cleaned this room first because it made her feel as if she were in a tomb. The burgundy wallpaper made the room seem cramped and stuffy, the heavy curtains didn't let in any sunlight, and as she passed by the photos on the table, Natalia averted her gaze. The people in the photos had long been dead, Salvador's wife and children. Without looking, Natalia wiped the dust off them and hurried away. Sometimes she felt as if Salvador's relatives blamed her for their deaths, and if she thought about it, they were right about something. Natalia finished cleaning Salvador's room, then moved on to his son's room, and tiptoed past the study where the homeowner was working. She could finish with the second floor and move on to the first, while also checking on Adrian and Victoria. The woman's fears were confirmed when she heard her coworker's cries as soon as she descended the stairs. "You clumsy oaf. You can't leave him alone for a second. Why did you climb up there?" Natalia quickened her pace and almost ran into the kitchen just in time. Victoria hovered over the boy like an angry fury, and from Adrian's expression, it was clear that he was about to burst into tears. "What happened?" Natalia exclaimed, running to her son and shielding him from her coworker. Victoria gave her an angry glance. "Don't you see it yourself? He broke a glass. I left the kitchen for a moment to answer the phone, and your little brat reached for the sink. Why did he climb up there? I told him to sit in the corner and not to stick out." Natalia looked questioningly at the boy, and he whispered, "I wanted to drink." "You see?" Natalia turned to her coworker. "Adrian just wanted to drink water. There was nothing criminal in his actions." Victoria almost choked with anger. "How can you say that? The glass is broken. Do you think the homeowner won't notice? Who will be responsible for this?" "Salvador won't count the glasses, you know that," Natalia said quietly. And besides, there are more of them here than guests in this house. Nobody will notice. And if they find out, you can blame me, say that I broke it. And I will go and tell everything right now, Victoria nodded. You presume of yourself too much. Bringing a child here, as if this is a private kindergarten, he breaks dishes, and for you, it's all just a part of the job, as if it's supposed to be like that. Remember, you are not the mistress here. Victoria took off her apron, raised her head proudly, and left the kitchen. Apparently, she was going to carry out her threat. Natalia sadly looked at her son. Well, we got caught, Adrian. I'm sorry, Mom, the boy muttered. Natalia patted his head. Don't worry, it's okay. Not everyone has to deal with such a mean caregiver, so you're my hero. Sit here quietly as a mouse for a little longer, okay? I want to see where she's going. As Natalia feared, Victoria went straight to the homeowner's office, where the man was going through some work documents. Salvador, may I come in? Victoria's voice instantly changed and became affectionate, as it always did when she addressed her boss. Sure, the man dryly said. Natalia waited for her coworker to disappear into the office and approached the door. She understood that eavesdropping was not good, but she could not help herself. Two fates were at stake, hers and her son's. Salvador, I have an important matter to discuss with you. You see, it has become impossible to work in this house. Why is that? Am I being too messy? Or did Sancho do something? No, of course not. Victoria exclaimed hastily. It has nothing to do with you. You are the perfect boss, and Sancho is the ideal assistant. I am talking about Natalia. Who is Natalia? Asked Salvador irritably. Victoria, you know, I don't have time to solve your riddles, I have to work, he replied to Natalia. Natalia, your housemaid, said Victoria in a complaining tone. And what did she do? Asked Salvador. She brought her son into the house, said Victoria. Who ever heard of letting someone's child into your home? It'd be okay if he behaved properly. But he went and rummaged through the cupboard without permission and broke a glass. Salvador exclaimed, slamming something on the table. Victoria, enough. I don't have time to listen to this nonsense. If this child starts playing with matches and burns down my house, then come and report it. Don't bother me with every little thing. Your glasses could cost me millions in this deal, he added. Victoria rushed out of the room, angrily clicking her heels as she left. Natalia breathed a sigh of relief. She had gotten lucky this time, but how long would it last? In Salvador's house, she felt like she was walking on a minefield. Everything seemed like a danger to her. How had Natalia ended up in this situation? Just a few years ago, everything had been going smoothly. The girl came to the city from the village to enter college, leaving her elderly mother behind in their hometown. Querubina gave birth to Natalia late in life, when she was well over 40, and raised her alone while working hard, which caused her to age prematurely. Querubina had a host of health problems and a cane, her joints bothered her, she had difficulty moving around, and the garden was half abandoned. Natalia couldn't handle it all. That's why Natalia didn't want to leave her mother alone. What if something happened? Who would help her? Mom, I'm not going anywhere, she said after finishing school. What is there in the city? Tall buildings, factory chimneys, or traffic jams? I'll stay here with you. Querubina looked at her daughter reproachfully. Have you lost your mind? You need to study and work. Natalia waved her hand carelessly. I can work here, for example, as a postman. I'll get a job at the post office and deliver newspapers. It's romantic and there's fresh air. There's no romance here, her mother warned her. Walking in the cold and mud on the streets. Yes, everything turns into a swamp after the first rain here. And how long can you walk with a mailbag if the village is dying? The farm closed, the poultry farm will soon close too, everyone will move away, there will be 5 houses left with old people, and you won't be needed with your mail. Remember my words. Mom, you're a pessimist, Natalia sighed. What am I supposed to do, in your opinion? Leave you here as the ultimate traitor and disappear? The city isn't that far away, Querubina said calmly. It's only an hour's drive. I'm not that old yet to need a caretaker. I don't need it. You'll study in the city and come to me on holidays, and weekends too if you want. But why are you upset as if we're parting forever? Persuaded by mother and her trickeries, the daughter was convinced to go to the city. Natalia did well in school, was considered one of the best graduates, and staying in the village with her abilities was just foolish. Querubina believed that her daughter was born for something greater than just existing in the village and tirelessly urged her daughter to change her mind. Natalia agreed with her mother's arguments and applied to college. The girl reasoned to herself that she could always get a job at the post office, especially since her best friend Camila supported her mother's persuasion. Querubina is right. What are we going to do here? The girl said, shaking her head disapprovingly. There are only old people left in the village. Even the cultural center is closed, and there's no library because there's no one to work there. And where will you find a fiancé here? Will you marry an old man? Natalia just laughed. What fiancés, Camila? What are you talking about? I'm thinking about which field of studying should I choose, and you're already trying to marry me off. I don't have time for that now. A young girl always has time for the stuff like this, Camila argued seriously. And where else, if not in college, you can find the great guy? You won't find that in school or at work anymore. You have to seize the moment. Natalia couldn't say that these conversations about guys inspired her. In the village school where she studied, there were no princes or knights, and Natalia herself was a modest girl who didn't wear bright makeup and wasn't surrounded by suitors. The only one who paid attention to Natalia was Sabino, a shy straight-A student who was always immersed in books and talked about higher matters. Camila laughed at him. And what did you find in him? She asked her friend. He's not a guy, he's a walking encyclopedia. It's so boring with him, you could die of boredom, she said. Natalia shrugged. I'm not planning to marry him, we're just friends. Really? I heard Sabino calls you his girlfriend, like it's serious between you two, Camila said. These news turned out to be quite unpleasant for Natalia. She couldn't stand when people gossiped behind her back, and coming up with such nonsense was sheer madness. However, Sabino continued to behave as usual, not bothering her with his courtships, only pretending to be a walking encyclopedia. He talked to the girl about space, told her about his future plans, and said he intended to become an academic. Gradually, Natalia calmed down. Maybe the guy didn't say anything like that. Perhaps her friend had just gotten it all mixed up. Whatever the case, it felt familiar and calm to be around Sabino, like a comfortable old shoe that's easy to walk in. Natalia continued to talk to him as an old friend, and everyone was happy. She wasn't looking for any other relationships. She came to the city to study, so romance could wait. The most important thing for Natalia was not to disappoint her mother, Querubina, who had placed so much hope in her. Natalia enrolled to study economics with a secret hope to eventually return to the village and take over from the aging Gabina in accounting. Her best friend, Camila, was by her side, and they were even given a room in the dormitory for the two of them, which seemed like a real miracle. Sabino, on the other hand, enrolled to study biology and settled in a different dormitory, much to Camila's obvious relief. He's neither fish nor meat, she muttered one day, watching the guy leave. You should just blow him off. He's not going to bring you any good, Camila said. It's awkward, Natalia mumbled. I've known him since childhood. We grew up on the same street, Camila said. And now you've grown up, said Natalia. He should find himself some geeky girl with glasses and talk to her about higher matters. He's like some old man who doesn't know how to have fun. Amila was right. Sabino immersed himself in his studies and didn't participate in any student events. He scornfully referred to those who went to parties as partygoers, saying, they're wasting precious time. Well, for me, While everyone else is drinking and dancing, I'll become the best student, turn in more assignments, write articles, and participate in competitions. The teachers will notice me, and then it's not far to graduate studies, right, Natalia? The girl muttered something vague in response. She didn't drink alcohol and only went to parties to keep her friend company, but she wasn't willing to study tirelessly. Sometimes, after a hard day of preparation and writing numerous papers, when Natalia's head was spinning with numbers and calculations, she just needed to relax a little, forget for a while that she was a diligent student, and feel like a young girl. Camila eagerly helped her with that. Manfredo's birthday is tomorrow. He's celebrating at his country house, which is not far from the city. Should we go? It will be great. Even if you don't want to dance, we can go for a walk. The weather is wonderful, and there's a forest and a river nearby. We might even get some sun. That Manfredo? Sabino asked. I hear that name every day. The girls in our group are going crazy about him. They talk about how his new hairstyle suits him. But I saw his picture. He's just a rich fop with no intelligence in his eyes, nothing to look at. Well, that's your opinion. Camila smirked and turned back to Natalia. So, are we going? Natalia didn't know whether to agree or not. Sabino warned her. Don't even think about it. Let's go to the cinema instead. I heard a war drama came out. It would be interesting to see. What would you do at the country house with those alcoholics? The disdainful tone in which the guy spoke decided the matter. Natalia looked at him indignantly and said, They're not alcoholics, they're perfectly normal guys. Ignacio is into rock climbing, Isidoro is getting a second degree and studies day and night. And Manfredo himself behaves decently, doesn't make advances towards girls, and always jokes politely. You don't know any of them, but you're throwing insults, is that okay? Sabino immediately became sad and lowered his gaze. Okay, sorry. I was wrong, it's just that, in my opinion, it's all just frivolous time wasting. Camila slyly squinted and said, But you've never come out with us, have you? So, I invite you. You'll go to the country house, have fun, and get to know the guys. There won't be anyone to get to know, Sabino shrugged. That's not true, Camila shook her head. By the way, Victor Alvarez is also going. Alvarez? Alvarez? Is it the dean's relative? The guy became interested. His son. See how useful it is to go to parties. You can make good connections, friendship for life. You're right, Sabino nodded with enthusiasm. Well, I should probably go then. So, tomorrow, right? Thanks for inviting me, girls. I'm gonna go now, I need to finish my coursework. Bye for now, the guy said, walking away with his funny bouncing gait that always made Camila laugh. Natalia looked at her friend disapprovingly. Why did you invite him? You said yourself he's a bore. Well, with such bores at parties, things get more fun, Camila winked at her. Don't worry, we'll go there and you can pretend like you don't know him. But that's not nice, Natalia hesitated. I'm afraid your friends might bully him. Well, that's news, Camila laughed. You said yourself that all the guys there are decent, who would bully him? If Manfredo starts joking around, there will be hell to pay for pool Sabino. Anyway, they won't kill him there, Camila shrugged. Don't worry so much. Besides, you can see he's happy, he can't wait for the dean's son to call him his best friend. Let's give him that chance, shall we? They drove to the summer house in Patricia's car, one of their friends. It was a small foreign car. Sabino was the only guy in the company and was annoying everyone terribly. He kept complaining about the cramped space, stuffy air, and claustrophobia. Listen, nerd, Camila abruptly interrupted him. Then you should have gone on feet, she said sharply. The guy didn't understand the joke. 20 kilometers? Are you crazy? Then don't complain. You wanted to meet Victor Alvarez? What's the problem then? Deal with it. Sabino looked at Natalia sitting next to him and let out a heavy sigh. I came only because of you, he whispered. The girl forced a smile. Of course, Sabino, I understand. They arrived at the party as some of the first guests, when people were just starting to gather. Manfredo came out to meet them, and Natalia handed him her gift. Here you go, birthday boy, the girl gave him a small box and smiled. Happy birthday, I hope you like it. Thank you, the guy nodded. I'm sure I will, a gift from such a beautiful girl simply can't be bad. The host of the party stepped aside to greet other guests, and Sabino asked jealously, What was that? What did you give him? Camila rolled her eyes wearily. Calm down, Sabino, there was no gold or diamonds in there, just an ordinary Netsuke. Netsuke? He asked, confused. It's a Buddhist figurine. Manfredo collects them, everyone knows that. So we bought one to give him a nice present. You have nothing better to do. Sabino scoffed and walked away. A real Othello. Natalia sighed. And what did I tell you? Camila chuckled. You'll see, it will be funny. The guests slowly filled the house and the party picked up pace. Music started playing, people started dancing, and Natalia held a glass of non-alcoholic cocktail, smiling as she watched the festivities. She enjoyed the lively atmosphere, which distracted her from her everyday life and stirred her soul. The only unpleasant thing was Sabino. As Natalia feared, he followed her relentlessly and expressed his displeasure. What kind of party is this? He grumbled. Nothing but laughter all around, no one to talk to, and Alvarez isn't even here. Camila tricked me. What do you mean he's not here? Camila quickly retorted. He is here, you just have to look closely. See those guys in the far corner? Alvarez is among them. Knock them dead. Sabino looked suspiciously in the direction she was pointing and asked, What are they doing there? Competing to see who can drink more. So if you're a real man, show us what you've got. Go, put Alvarez on the blades. Sabino blushed and paled, but didn't move. Natalia stood up for her friend. Stop it, Camila, leave him alone. He's never had a drop of alcohol, how can he compete in those games? Oh, I forgot. Camila pretended to sigh. Well, then some other time. You'll meet Alvarez in a more formal setting, when you're both wearing ties. No, I'll go. Sabino mumbled. You can't miss this opportunity. On his trembling legs, he began to make his way through the crowd towards the guys. Natalia tried to stop him, but vainly, he wasn't listening anymore. Everything will be fine, he assured the girl. You'll see, I'll beat them all, I have good genes. What did he say about genes? Camila asked when Sabino left. His grandfather was an alcoholic, Natalia muttered bitterly. You didn't know? That's why Sabino doesn't like alcohol, parties, and things like that. Why did he even go there? We won't be able to lug him to the dormitory. Don't panic prematurely, Camila reassured her. If what you say is true about his grandfather, then Sabino should be able to handle it, Natalia observed anxiously. She watched Sabino closely, while Camila tried to convince her to dance. But Natalia had lost all desire to have fun. We shouldn't have started this, she muttered. Camila finally gave up on persuading her. Okay, I won't try to convince you. If you want to dance, you know where to find me. Natalia absent-mindedly nodded her head. The scene in the corner of the living room captured all her attention. The guys easily accepted Sabino into their circle, and he stupidly grinned, mumbled something, and clearly tried to get Alvarez's attention. Natalia felt disgusted watching this. Didn't Sabino have any pride? What about his endless speeches about how he would achieve everything with his mind and become an academic? Was it all just talk? Sabino drank one glass, then another, and a third. The audience encouraged him, and Sabino could barely stand on his feet, bowing to everyone like an actor after a performance. Natalia tried to break through to him, to take him outside for some fresh air, but then stopped herself. Didn't he choose all of this himself? Natalia felt utterly disappointed. It was already getting dark outside. She wanted to be as far away from this crowd, this celebration as possible, and even better, in her own bed with her mother by her side. There was silence in the room, and there wasn't a single drunk and rowdy guest around. But all of this was just her imagination. Who would take her home, or at least to the city? Patricia was lost in the crowd, and Natalia didn't know any other drivers. And you wouldn't ask someone to take you when the party was in full swing. Wanting to distract herself, the girl went down to the garden and started wandering among the trees. The green landscape calmed her down, gave her a sense of security, and Natalia felt like she was at home. She felt good here, leaned against a tree, and closed her eyes. The girl had already decided that she could survive this night, but her peace was short-lived. Somewhere nearby, a twig snapped and a drunken voice said, "Look who is here." "What are you doing here, beauty? Everyone is having fun inside, and you're alone." Natalia barely held back a groan, but why was all of this happening to her? First, the stupid Sabino participating in a silly contest, now this. The girl turned to leave, but the stranger caught her hand. "Why, can't we talk? Don't be so rude to me." Now Natalia was truly frightened. It was impossible to make out the guy in the growing darkness, but his figure resembled a wardrobe. "Let me go," she shouted. "I don't want to talk to you." "And why is that?" The stranger laughed. Natalia jerked her hand again and somehow managed to break free. The girl hurried back to the house, to the comforting light of the living room. The guy followed her on her heels. "Leave me alone," Natalia screamed. The house was getting closer and closer. Through one of the windows, the girl saw Sabino, who seemed to be looking at her. Natalia panicked and waved her arms to get his attention. But her friend just stupidly smiled and turned away from her. The stranger grabbed Natalia again and said, "Let's go talk." "Yes, I won't eat you. What do you behave like this?" Natalia prepared to scream, although she didn't hope anyone in the house would hear her with such loud music. "Macario, let the girl go," someone's voice sounded from the side. "What, did I invite you here for this?" The stranger holding her hand laughed. Natalia looked back. She saw the guy who came to her rescue for the first time. Although, maybe not for the first time, who knows? In the semi-darkness that reigned on the street, the girl could only see that the guy had light hair and quite regular facial features. The stranger holding her laughed and said, "Who are you? A commander? A teacher? Get out of here before I hit you." "I warn you for the last time," the blonde said threateningly. The big guy continued to laugh. The blonde guy swung his fist and hit him in the face, and the laughter stopped. The big guy who had grabbed Natalia released his victim and was sitting on the ground, gasping for air. "Are you okay?" the blonde asked, looking at her. "I think so," Natalia said, stuttering, trembling. "Well, it doesn't seem to be true," the guy noted. "Let me take you to the house. Have a drink, calm down." "No, I don't want to go to the house," Natalia shook her head. She remembered Sabino, Camila, who started all this mess, and suddenly realized she didn't want to see any of them. "Where do you want to go?" "Home," whispered Natalia, and unexpectedly burst into tears. "What's wrong?" The blonde guy was surprised. "Did Macario hurt you?" "No," Natalia muttered. "I just had a very bad day." "I can relate," the guy nodded. "I have those days too. So, shall we leave? Are you tired of being here too?" The girl was surprised. "You can't imagine how much," the blonde guy nodded. "Besides that boy Macario, Manfredo, and a couple of other people, I don't know anyone here. So, I don't see the point in staying. Natalia smiled shyly. Then let's go. The boy took her to the outskirts of the cottage community, where many guests had left their cars. The guy's car made an impression on Natalia. She didn't know much about cars, but it was obvious at first glance that it was a foreign car and an expensive one. I feel awkward getting into this car, she said modestly. It's all good, the guy reassured her. Even Macario used to ride in it, although after what he did today, he won't anymore. Do I need passengers like him? Is he your friend? Natalia asked. The blond boy shook his head. If only. He's my brother's friend. My brother asked me to take Macario with me, saying he's depressed and needs to entertain. Well, surely he's having fun, as you saw. I've been running after him like a nanny all evening, dragging him away from bottles and girls. Thanks for coming and saving me. By the way, my name is Natalia, and yours? Natalia asked. Natan. Sorry, I didn't introduce myself earlier. I was annoyed, he said. They got on the highway, and for a moment, Natalia lost her ability to speak, but then she pulled herself together and squeaked. Why are we going so fast? What, too fast? Natan was surprised. Not the word, the trees on the roadside are smeared. Slow down please, it's very scary, said Natalia. Natan slowed down and apologized. Sorry, I didn't know. I always drive like that, it's a habit. Are you a racer? Stuttered the girl. Something like that, the guy smiled. I don't like to live quietly, always rushing somewhere. You have to seize every moment, otherwise life will pass by unnoticed, said Natalia. I think if you drive like you do, life can end even faster, Natalia admitted. It's very dangerous. And life is a dangerous thing in general, Natan winked. Whatever you choose, you'll still die in the end. So why be afraid of death and think about it prematurely? You're a philosopher, noticed the girl. But let's talk about something more pleasant. You know, in the darkness and after what happened, conversations about death don't warm the soul. Agreed, the guy said. Then tell me about yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? And how did you end up at today's party? You know, I was very surprised to see you in the garden. While everyone was having fun and dancing, you were alone and went into darkness. Don't you like big crowds? The girl pondered for a moment and confessed, No, I think it's because I grew up in a village. There was an abandoned house nearby, and the neighbors across from us only came in the summer. In such an atmosphere, you get used to the quiet, and all that noise just becomes unnecessary. Natan nodded. I feel the same way. Not in the sense that I live in a village, but after our mother's death, my father became completely closed off, and we hardly ever have guests in our house. So I got used to the silence. I even drive without music. Why do you need music when there's the wind outside? They talked about such things all the way. Natalia was completely charmed. She had never had such easy conversations before. Their thoughts on completely different things completely coincided. Sabino never agreed with her. On the contrary, he always argued and proved his point. Camila called all these lofty conversations nonsense. Unexpectedly, she found a person to talk to at a random party, with whom it was easy and simple, without choosing words and convenient topics for conversation. She couldn't sleep that night, even though Natan dropped her off at the dormitory around 11 o'clock. After listening to the reprimands of the sleepy watchman, Natalia went up to her room and lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling and replaying every sentence that she and Natan had said to each other in her head. And in the morning, just as she had finally managed to doze off, the door burst open, making Natalia jump in bed. Camila was standing in the doorway. There she is, said the friend angrily. I called her and was going out of my mind with worry, and she was sleeping. Do you know that Sabino and I called all the hospitals and morgues? The guys searched for you in the forest all night. Sabino was still able to look for someone? Natalia muttered sleepily. Don't joke like that, Camila admonished. He sobered up immediately when he found out you were missing, she continued. But when he saw a drunk guy harassing me from the window, he immediately turned away, Natalia said, hugging her knees. The girl remembered the events of the previous evening and shuddered again. How could everything have ended if Natan had not appeared? A drunk guy? Camila's tone immediately softened, and she looked at her with fear. You're scaring me. Tell me more about what happened. I got tired of being in the house. I wanted to get some fresh air, Natalia said. I went out to the garden, decided to take a walk, and a drunk guy started bothering me. He grabbed my hand, wanted to take me somewhere. I started screaming. And did he get scared? Camila asked. Not really, Natalia smiled wryly. He didn't think twice about it. He only stopped when another guy made him. Natan came and saved me, and I left with him to the city. Natan? Camila asked in surprise. Interesting to know. Do I know this Superman? Which group is he from? I don't know, Natalia shrugged. We didn't talk about studies. It seems like he's graduating from university next year. That's all I know about him. Then what did you talk about? My dear, I don't recognize you. The Natalia I know was obsessed with education. She would have asked about the guy's education first and what his favorite subject is. So, it seems like there's no such girl anymore. Natalia smiled. Well, you never cease to amaze me, dear. Camila smiled back and began to tell details about last night's party. Sabino also wanted to meet the girl when he found out she was safe, but Natalia refused to meet with him. I don't want to see you again or talk to you, she said, offended. You put on that performance with alcohol. Want to say you beat everyone? That's a great achievement. And then, when I needed your help more than ever in my life, you turned away and went laughing with your new buddies. What's that called? What are you talking about? Sabino was surprised. When did I turn away from you? Natalia understood from his face that he didn't remember anything that happened. Maybe he didn't even see her in the darkness of the garden. But she couldn't back down now. The anger towards Sabino didn't want to subside in her soul. It's over, she said. And don't follow me around and teach me how to live. Yesterday I saw that all your lessons are worthless. You don't even follow them yourself. So sorry, we're not friends anymore. I can't stand two-faced people. And no matter how much Sabino apologized to her, even almost crying, Natalia couldn't forgive him. She tried, but every time the scene with laughing Sabino in the window, the traitor who left her in such a dangerous moment, appeared before her eyes. Before saying goodnight near the dormitory door, Natalia and Natan exchanged phone numbers, but the girl couldn't imagine that the guy would call her, at least not so soon. Natan called her the very next day and asked, How are you? How do you feel after yesterday? After the attack by the thug Macario, or after your crazy driving? Natalia slyly asked. After all of that at once. Natan laughed. Well, it seems like this, replied the girl. So you're ready for new adventures? Natan remarked with satisfaction. Be ready in 2 hours, I'll come over, and we'll start making the real person out of you. What do you mean? Natalia asked anxiously. We'll get you ready for any situation, maybe even teach you to fight so you can stand up for yourself if there's another thug around. But first, we'll teach you to get used to speed because 150 kilometers per hour made it seem like you just went on a roller coaster in the US. Roller coasters probably aren't that scary. Natalia laughed. But I agree. So, where do we start the training? We'll start with bicycles. If you're a total scaredy cat, then a speed of 23 kilometers per hour would be just right to start with. Where are you guys going? Asked Camila with curiosity, watching as her friend flipped through the closet in search of suitable clothing. Biking. Natalia answered from the depths of the closet. Well. Camila shook her head. You haven't ridden a bike since you were 10, if I'm not mistaken. Apparently, this guy has really caught your attention if you're willing to take such a risk. Natalia wasn't really afraid. In her understanding, riding various scooters, bikes, and skateboards was quite an extreme entertainment that should be avoided. But for the sake of being with Natan, she was willing to do anything. They arrived at the waterfront and rented a couple of bikes. At the sight of these two-wheeled monsters, which seemed bigger than they actually were due to her excitement, a shiver ran down Natalia's spine. Natan gave her a brief instruction Natalia didn't remember a word of, and he looked at her attentively. Can you handle it? The girl confidently nodded. After all, they say that once you learn how to ride a bike, you never forget. Although, if she remembered how many times she fell due to her carelessness, it happened again now. At first, Natalia rode quite well and even gained speed, enjoying the warm wind. But then, as soon as she lost her vigilance, she fell down. Worried, Natan abandoned his bike and ran to her. Did you hurt yourself? Nah, the girl said, grimacing. Just scraped my knee a bit, but it hardly hurts. Just scraped it? Exclaimed Natan. You have a real battle wound here. Take my hand, get up, and let's go patch you up. She felt safe holding his warm hand as he escorted her to the car, apologizing nonstop and making Natalia feel embarrassed. Well, it's my fault. I got distracted by a funny pug that some girl was walking. I should have paid more attention to the road, she said. But the whole idea of going riding was mine, Natan protested. I definitely should have invited you to a cafe like all the normal guys do on dates, he replied. Natalia was both flattered and confused when Natan referred to their meeting as a date. All of her knowledge about dates was limited to long, tedious walks with Sabino, during which her childhood friend spouted off scientific facts. As they pulled up to Natan's house, Natalia's panic increased. I'm not going to go to your home, she stammered. Why not? Natan asked, surprised. Didn't we leave the promenade to get my wound treated? Natalia asked. Yes, but I thought we were going to the hospital, Natan explained. We'd spend 2 hours waiting there. Plus, my house is closer. Don't doubt, Senora Teodora knows more about bruises than any doctor. You'll be in good hands. Natalia wasn't familiar with Senora Teodora. But that wasn't what worried her the most. Going to a guy's house. Numerous warnings from Camila flooded Natalia's memory. Don't trust the first stranger, don't go anywhere with him, and God forbid, don't cross the threshold of his house. Natalia broke all these rules one by one and ended up not in an ordinary house, but in a real 3-story mansion. Natan's residence resembled a castle, but Natalia didn't feel like a princess as she stepped inside. She felt like Cinderella. She clearly didn't belong here. Senora Teodora, can I talk to you for a minute? Natan called out as soon as they entered the hall. We need you than ever, he added. Footsteps were heard on the stairs. I'm coming, a thin elderly woman said as she descended to the first floor. Seeing Natalia, she smiled warmly. Oh, we have guests today? What a surprise. Senora Teodora, these are not guests, this is a patient, Natan corrected her. Take a look at her knee, he added. The woman noticed the hole in Natalia's pants and chuckled her tongue. We need to treat the wound right away. Let's go to the kitchen. The girl followed the mysterious Senora Teodora. My name is Natalia, she introduced herself. Senora Teodora, the woman smiled. I'm a maid in this house. I've been working here for 20 years. I've known Natan and his brothers since they were kids, so I've become an auntie for everyone here. She treated the girl's wound with iodine and applied a neat bandage. Then she smiled. That's it, you can start running again. We weren't running, we were riding bikes, Natalia corrected her and sighed. Now he probably won't invite me anywhere. I disappointed him so much. Senora Teodora shook her head. That can't be true. Trust me, I know Natan. He wouldn't bring just anyone to his house. If it happened, it means you mean a lot to him. Really? The girl asked hopefully. Absolutely, Senora Teodora nodded. Footsteps were heard in the hallway, and a guy who looked a bit like Sabino, skinny, hunched, and wearing glasses, walked into the kitchen. Seeing the girl, he stopped at the doorway. Meet Sancho, Senora Teodora said. This is Natalia, Natan's guest. Already with a bandage? Sancho said instead of greeting, noticing the whitening plaster. I fell off my bike, the girl explained, blushing. But you got on the bike at Natan's request, right? The guy clarified. My advice to you, if you want to live peacefully, stay away from my brother. You'll be safer, he said. He took a bottle of water from the fridge and left the kitchen. Natalia looked at Senora Teodora questioningly. What was that about? She asked. They don't get along, the woman sighed. Not since they were children. Why not? The girl was surprised. Senora Teodora shrugged. They're too different. Natan can't sit still and is always looking for adventure. Sancho, on the other hand, is a homebody who can spend a week in his room buried in books. They used to fight about it a lot when they were little, and nothing's changed now. Sancho just can't understand his brother. He's different, you know? Natalia didn't understand, nor did she want to be honest. She was in love, and no other guys besides Natan caught her attention. They continued to see each other, though without the extreme activities like biking or scootering. Natan had come to terms with the fact that Natalia wasn't a thrill seeker, but rather a bit of a scaredy cat. They went to the movies, visited cafes, and went out of town a few times when the weather was nice. Camila was incredibly envious of her friend. You're so lucky. So lucky, she would say. Such a car, house, and Natan's good looking. Not like Sabino. Everything's perfect, right? No, I don't need his money, Natalia blushed. I love Natan, whether he's rich or poor, it doesn't matter. Everyone says that, Camila waved it off. But having money is better, isn't it? Living in a big house is more pleasant than a small one. You can get away faster and farther in a fancy car, and so on. Natalia's face darkened. Her friend looked at her and became concerned. Okay, I didn't mean anything like that. I don't think you're one of those girls who will be with a guy just for money, Camila said. I believe you, Camila, Natalia smiled. Don't worry, something else is bothering me, Natalia continued. What exactly? Her friend asked. Are you going through troubles in your relationship that you haven't told me about? No, everything is fine in our relationship, Natalia mumbled. I'm just worried, you know, Natan loves danger, fast driving, and some trips to the mountains where, as he told me, they do rock climbing, she said. So what? Camila asked in surprise. Many guys are like that. Well, if we don't count Sabino, but that guy was always an exception to the rule, Natalia said. I understand, Camila nodded. But if something happens to Natan, I won't survive, said Natalia. What can happen to him? Camila was surprised. He's been driving for a while, and he doesn't go to the mountains often, at least not now that he's with you, like he's tied up. Don't worry unnecessarily. Deep down, Natalia acknowledged that her friend was right, yet continued to worry. Natan was in a rush to live, didn't take care of himself, and something bad could have happened to him. Natalia's premonitions didn't deceive her. Later, she blamed herself for bringing trouble to Natan with her fears. Camila assured the girl that she was not to blame, but it no longer mattered. It was impossible to change anything. The misfortune occurred on a gray November day when nothing good was expected anyway. From the early morning, Natalia tried to call Natan, sent him messages, but received no response. The girl was restless, fidgeting at her desk in the lecture hall, drawing the attention of the lecturer. "Go out into the hallway," he ordered, looking sternly at Natalia. "You don't seem interested in my lecture anyway." On any other day, Natalia would have started apologizing and looking for ways to stay in the lecture hall, but now she had other priorities. She was anxious to make sure her beloved was okay. Natalia's phone rang before she could leave the room. The lecturer launched another angry tirade, and the girl, closing the door behind her, answered the call in panic. "Hello, Natan, it's good that you called. I'm going crazy with worry. How is it?" She expected to hear Natan's soft voice, to which she had long grown accustomed. She would have even been glad if he called her a panicker or a coward. However, the voice that came from the phone did not belong to the boy. "Is this Natalia, Natan's girlfriend?" "Yes, who are you?" "Senora Teodora. I hope you remember me." Natalia's anxiety grew with each passing second. Why did the housekeeper call her? How did she get his phone number? "Where is Natan?" she asked, sounding frightened. "Why are you calling from his phone? What happened?" The woman hesitated. "There was so much commotion in the house today, I decided to do some unplanned cleaning to calm my nerves. And I heard a call in Natalia's room. It seems he forgot his phone at home, with 40 missed calls. You called again and again, I know, so I decided to call you back. In any case, someone had to do it, tell it to you. And who else but me? Natan's father never found out about you." "Tell me what?" Natalia asked. "Natan got into an accident tonight," the woman said heavily, sighing. "He was apparently on his way to a friend's place to pick something up, and as usual, he was speeding." "But is he alive?" Natalia shouted. "I'm sorry, Natalia, but no," Senora Teodora murmured. "At that speed, no one survives." The car was crushed from the driver's side, and Natan died on the spot. He didn't even suffer. Natalia dropped the phone, her fingers weakened, she swayed, and sat down on a bench. A ringing sound echoed in the hallway, and Camila, who had jumped out of the office, rushed to her. "Well done," she shook her head. "You drove Pablo Velasco crazy. He kept remembering about you until the end of class. What happened? What did Natan say?" Camila noticed her friend's expression and faltered. "That wasn't Natan," Natalia muttered. "What do you mean it wasn't him?" Camila was surprised. "Do you think I didn't memorize the ringtone you put on his number? I memorized it by heart. Tell me, what happened?" "Natan died," Natalia said, feeling tears welling up in her eyes. "It was not Natan who called, but Senora Teodora. He's gone, Camila, you understand, he's gone." The whole story was simply horrible. Natalia couldn't imagine how to live on, but it was even worse that she couldn't even say goodbye to him on a real. No one except Senora Teodora knew that they were dating. Natalia didn't dare to come to the funeral. She found out from Senora Teodora where and when Natan's funeral would be held, and at the appointed time, she came to the cemetery and watched everything from afar. Life lost all meaning for the girl, and she didn't know how to move on. And a few months later, she realized she was pregnant. Camila almost choked on champagne when she heard the news. "Wow, what a New Year's gift," she muttered. "And what are you going to do?" "Give birth," Natalia simply replied. "Give birth?" Camila exclaimed. "Alone, without a husband?" "Yes," Natalia nodded. "Natan was brave, he wasn't afraid of speed or heights. I must be worthy of him. But even climbing a mountain 1,000 times is easier than giving birth and raising a child. You've certainly found some adventure for yourself." The worst part was explaining it to her mother. Querubina didn't try to dissuade her daughter from her decision, but it was clear that she was deeply disappointed in Natalia. She had expected her daughter to go to the city and achieve great heights, but she ended up being a single mother. "My daughter followed in my footsteps," Querubina shook her head. And what good is that to us? It's like a family curse. Despite the opinions of her loved ones, Natalia did not consider her future child a burden. On the contrary, she was glad that she would have some memory of Natan. And a little later, Natalia found her guardian angel, or rather met her at the market when she went there for fresh fruit. "Natalia, is that you?" Signora Teodora exclaimed in surprise, spotting the girl among the rows. "How are you doing? Oh my God, are you pregnant?" Natalia nodded. "From Natan?" the woman asked with a lowered voice. "Of course, Signora Teodora," Natalia smiled. "I always loved only him." "Oh my God," Teodora whispered again, seeming to have no other words left. She invited the girl to her home to have some tea and talk. Natalia eagerly went with her, needing to talk to someone who knew Natan as well as she did. Teodora came to his house when he was only 3 years old and treated Natan as her own son. He was such a mischief maker, the woman remembered, stirring her tea with a spoon. The whole house was in chaos because of Natan's pranks. Sometimes he played as a pilot, sometimes as a soldier. Sancho was more calm, always with his nose in books. He lost every game when he played with his brother. Natan was lively, but still a good and kind boy. If he broke something, he helped me clean it up. He would kiss me on the cheek in the morning like I'm his dear aunt. Everything changed at home. Salvador is always busy with work, he hardly talks to Sancho anymore. Sancho, being a scholar, dreams about science and barely talked to anyone except his brother. They were so different, but they still loved each other. It's hard to say how long they sat there, lost in memories, and who cried more. When the tears stopped and the tea was cold, Teodora asked, "How are you doing, Natalia? What are you going to do? You won't be able to study with a baby, and you can't live in a dormitory with a child." "I don't know," the girl muttered. "I won't give up on the baby, but I have no idea what to do next. I'll probably have to go back to the village to live with my mother and continue studying when the baby is a little older." The woman shook her head. "You can't put off something like this for later. Right now, it may seem like you have plenty of time, but then your responsibilities will pile up and you won't have time for your studies. First, you'll be waiting for your child to start going to daycare, then they'll have school problems. That's why you should move in with me. I have 3 rooms and I live alone. My husband passed away and my children moved away. It will be more fun for both of us, and we can take care of the child together." "Oh, Signora Teodora!" exclaimed Natalia. "This is inconvenient. I'm a complete stranger to you, and you don't owe me anything." "I'm doing this for Natan," the woman replied. "Your future child is like a grandchild to me. How could I let their life go off track? If things go well for you, they will go well for him too. Please don't refuse, Natalia. It's very important to me." So they began to live together. At first, it seemed strange to Natalia to live with a stranger, but she soon got used to Teodora and began to consider her like family. Signora Teodora treated her like a mother, and by the time the baby was born, they had become inseparable. Natalia named her son Adrian, after her grandfather, who had taken care of her when she was a little girl. Teodora happily took on the role of a nanny, teaching Natalia how to swaddle and feed the baby from a bottle but preferring to do everything herself. "He looks so much like Natan, he'll grow up to be his spitting image. I just hope I live long enough to see what he becomes." Natalia switched to distance learning and eventually got a job as a secretary at a small firm located nearby. However, this job soon disappointed her. The pay was low, her boss was constantly nitpicking, Natalia lost her sleep and peace of mind, and she started to drink calming medication more and more often. "Leave it," Teodora commanded decisively, watching her suffer. "I make good money, and I have a pension. Won't I be able to support you?" "No, Signora Teodora." The girl shook her head. "I won't burden you. Besides, I still have to pay for my education and buy things for Adrian. How will you pay for everything? If anyone needs to leave their job, it's you. You were the one who complained about how difficult it was becoming, how your back and legs hurt. You should quit and stay at home to take care of Adrian. He loves you so much. Teodora thought for a moment and nodded. That's actually not a bad idea. My legs are not what they used to be, you're right. But I don't want to lose such a good salary. Salvador always pays well and even gives bonuses for holidays. And besides, he's a good boss. He's fair and doesn't get angry over trivial things. What are you suggesting? Natalia didn't understand. Take this job instead of me. Senora Teodora said. I'll tell him that I'm having trouble working and can't keep up. And you, my niece from the village, can look for work. You're a good girl. We've become like family to Salvador over the years. I've been a mother to his sons, he'll listen to me, and you'll get the job in the house. The people there are nice, the owners, the cook Laura, and the gardener. Only Victoria, my partner, can be difficult, but you'll figure it out. Don't talk too much to her, pretend like all you think is work, and everything will be fine. Natalia was frightened by this proposal, not because she was afraid of work, she was used to everything in the village. But to be near Natin's relatives was scary. What if they found out something, or if Sancho recognized her? They had met once before. What would it look like? Natin's ex-girlfriend sneaked into his family's home to gain their trust and force her little son on them, and maybe even try to claim inheritance since Adrian is Natin's legal son. It's all nonsense, waved Teodora's hand when the girl shared her concerns. Anyone who looks at you will understand that you are, essentially, a pure angel. Well, that's too much, the girl blushed. I'm just telling the truth, Senora Teodora replied. And anyway, it's not humane to hide Natin's son. Salvador might come alive if he found out that his grandson was growing somewhere in the world. Natalia shook her head. I understand that, but I'm not ready to come and confess like that. Hello, I'm your unsuccessful fiancé, and this is your grandson. What will Salvador think? He'll probably decide that I came for money, and I thought of latching onto a rich guy to get into a good family. Maybe later. It's your business, sighed Senora Teodora. But think about the job. It's a good place. It's a shame to miss it. You'll get an education, find something else, but for now, it would be nice to have a place in the house. You'd earn money for your son. Natalia thought for 2 weeks until her boss's nitpicking became unbearable, and then she finally decided. I've thought about your offer, and I want to try, she told Senora Teodora. Anyway, at some point, I need to get to know Natin's family better. Maybe if they're really good people, I'll introduce Adrian to them later. It's been a long time coming. Teodora agreed happily. Then tomorrow I'll talk to Salvador, and on Monday, I might take you to meet them. And don't be afraid, Salvador may look stern, but he's actually a good person. Everything worked out exactly as the woman had planned. Salvador, of course, was upset to hear that Senora Teodora, who had worked in their house for many years, had decided to quit, but he didn't argue. All right, bring your niece over. He sighed. If you vouch for her, then she must be a good girl. Natalia was terribly afraid of this meeting, but it didn't go at all as she had expected. Salvador barely greeted her, they signed some documents, and Teodora took the girl to get to know the house. The bedrooms are on the second floor, the owner's office, the guest room. On the first floor is the kitchen, dining room, living room. Oh, hi, Victoria. Meet Natalia, my niece. She's going to start working for me from tomorrow. For some reason, Natalia expected Victoria to be an older woman, but it turned out that her coworker was almost her own age. A pretty blonde with blue eyes and a slightly haughty look. Hi. She nodded. So we're going to work together. She didn't show any particular enthusiasm about the arrival of a new coworker. Yes. Natalia smiled. I hope we become friends. Victoria looked at her with deep skepticism and went about her business, solemnly carrying the sheets in front of her as if they were a festive cake. Natalia looked at Teodora and remarked, "She seems unfriendly." "I warned you," the woman sighed. "Just keep in mind that Victoria has her eye on Sancho. I've been watching her and noticed it a while ago, so be careful." "Why should I be careful?" Natalia didn't understand. "I don't need Sancho, let them do whatever they want," she continued. "Whether you need him or not, only we know that," Teodora replied. "You know how jealous some girls can get. If she thinks you're interested in Sancho, it could get ugly. So it's better not to even get close to him. Your reputation is worth more. Just do your job honestly and that's it." "Don't worry about it," Natalia reassured her. "You know that I only have eyes for Adrian. I won't even glance at Sancho." The girl kept her word and immersed herself in her work. At first, Natalia was afraid of being exposed. But time passed, and nothing terrible happened. Salvador was really out of it from work, hiding behind his papers from the world, trying to forget his sorrowful losses. Sancho was increasingly disappearing into the institute where he taught and, on top of that, was studying in graduate school. He rarely came home, but when he did, Victoria was always there, right by his side. "What's new at the university?" she asked with a smile. "The dissertation is progressing slowly," Sancho replied vaguely. Natalia, who was sometimes present for these conversations, hid her smile. Victoria couldn't get into the university and didn't even go to a college because it was beneath her dignity. However, she spouted intelligent phrases, sometimes not even understanding their meaning. "I too would like to become a professor," she said dreamily, rolling her eyes. "Or at least a kindergarten teacher. I've always loved teaching children, raising them, preferably with affection. Why resort to yelling? Well, the students I work with in the lab are no longer like children. And you can't get by with just affection. I can't even imagine how I would gently pat the head of a thug who's taller than me." Sancho smirked. Natalia couldn't help but laugh at the image. Sancho smiled too. Victoria paled with anger, glancing from one person to another. "I just wanted to say that rudeness is not the answer," she corrected herself. "You need to teach with heart." When Sancho left the living room to work in his room, Victoria attacked her coworker. "Why are you laughing, you idiot? Did you decide to make me look like a fool in front of Sancho?" Natalia shook her head. "Of course not, Victoria, what are you talking about? I just imagined Sancho patting the head of some thug and couldn't help myself. I can't imagine him as a kind nanny." "You're a liar," Victoria rudely replied. "What, can't I see? You yourself have your eyes on Sancho and keep interrupting me with your constant giggling." Since then, Victoria had grown to dislike Natalia even more, constantly making snide remarks or simply giving her icy silence. By that time, Natalia had been working in the house for several years and should have grown accustomed to Victoria's unpleasant character, but the whole situation was still very upsetting to her. And then, to top it all off, Senora Teodora caught a cold. She had gotten caught in the rain, caught bronchitis, and was unable to care for Adrian. Natalia already knew that the idea of bringing her son to work would end in disaster. After listening to Victoria's conversation with Salvador and seeing that the storm had temporarily passed, Natalia returned to the kitchen and was surprised to find Sancho there. He was leaning over Adrian's album, enthusiastically drawing with a pencil. "Mama, we're drawing," the boy exclaimed happily. "I haven't done this in 100 years, Sancho admitted. "I just tried it now, and it turned out to be very fascinating. It's not for nothing that psychologists recommend art therapy." "It's very beautiful," Natalia said, looking at the drawing. "And what did you draw?" Adrian pointed to the crooked teddy bear. "That's mine, and Mr. Sancho drew the bunny," he said. Natalia flinched when she heard it, but Sancho just grinned. I've always drawn like a chicken scratch. You probably wouldn't even be able to tell whose drawing is whose in real life, right? He said. Etiquette rules demanded that Natalia politely lie and say that Sancho was the best artist in the world, but instead she smiled. Well, you certainly won't be the next Ivazovsky. But that's probably for the best. I can't stand academic painting, she said. Victoria looked into the kitchen, but when she saw Sancho next to her coworker, she glared and stormed off. What was that about? Sancho asked. Don't pay attention to her. She's just not in the mood today, Natalia mumbled. She felt down at the thought of how much longer they would bicker like cats and dogs. Sancho looked at his watch. Anyway, I have to run. I'm giving an important presentation today, and a bunch of professors are gathering. My fate pretty much depends on this performance, he said. Good luck, Natalia nodded, speaking completely sincerely. She liked Sancho and felt that under different circumstances, they could be friends. Sancho reminded her of Sabino, a similarly intelligent scholar, only more refined and sophisticated. At least Natalia couldn't imagine a situation where Sancho would start drinking for a bet. For a while, the house was quiet and peaceful. Natalia was vacuuming in the living room, and Victoria was probably raging somewhere on the upper floors. Then the phone rang in the kitchen. Mom, the phone is ringing, Adrian yelled. I hear you, darling, I hear you, the girl replied. Just don't speak so loud, please. Remember we're playing hide and seek here. She picked up the receiver and said, Hello? The caller was Sancho, who wasted no time with formalities and immediately started talking on the phone. Natalia, thank God you're there, he said. What happened? The girl was surprised. I had a real disaster. Long story short, my laptop died, and I urgently need a replacement, or I can forget about my presentation. But don't they have other laptops at the university? Natalia asked. My arrogance let me down, Sancho sighed sadly. I made a fancy presentation that weighs more than all the other documents on my flash drive combined. The local, old laptops can't handle it. What can we do? Natalia asked. If it's not too much trouble, could you take the laptop from my brother's room and bring it here, please? The presentation is in half an hour. Take a taxi, it'll be faster, I'll pay for the ride. But I can't, I have to work, the girl stammered. What will Salvador say when he finds out that I left without permission? I'll talk to Dad, he'll understand. Natalia, please help me, I'm begging you. Okay, the girl muttered and hung up, then looked at her son. Adrian, I need to leave for a moment, will you wait for me here? The child nodded with unprecedented seriousness. Thank you, my good boy, Natalia smiled. And remember what we talked about, sit quietly, don't shout or run around. And don't go near Victoria, even if she shows up. Pretend to be invisible, okay? Adrian nodded again. Okay, Mom. Entering Natin's room, Natalia felt an involuntary shiver. She rarely cleaned up here, there was no need to make the bed or water the plants, yet every time Natalia crossed the threshold, it seemed to her that the room's owner was alive and about to appear from around the corner and smile absent-mindedly at her. The laptop was lying on the table, vainly awaiting its owner's return. Natalia grabbed it, held it to her chest, and after a few moments of hesitation, rushed out onto the street. She mentally urged the taxi to go faster and asked the organizers to wait a little and start the event a bit later. An agitated Sancho was waiting for the girl on the street. I owe you, he said gratefully. Thank you, Natalia replied as she watched him go before getting back into the taxi. Her workday was over, and she had to pick up Adrian and head home. The next day started off strangely. Teodora still wasn't feeling well, so Natalia had to bring Adrian to work with her again. Victoria greeted her with a mysterious smile when she saw her in the kitchen. Here she is, she said meaningfully. Natalia didn't understand what she meant and silently walked past her. Sancho was the next to appear. He also came into the kitchen for some reason and stopped dead in his tracks, as if he was seeing Natalia for the first time. "Hello," Natalia smiled. "How did the presentation go?" Sancho nodded. "Good," the guy replied. "Thanks again for your help." Contrary to habit, he didn't stay to chat with her. There was some kind of amazement or bewilderment frozen on Sancho's face. Natalia didn't know how to describe the feeling. During lunch, Salvador summoned her to his office. "With your son," Victoria added with a sinister smile. Natalia walked into the owner's office with her son and had no idea what the conversation would be about. Were they going to punish her for bringing her child into the house? But nothing bad had happened. Adrian hadn't broken anything, made any noise, or misbehaved. Why would Salvador punish her? The man was sitting at his desk in his office as usual. Natalia walked in with her son by her side. Victoria remained standing next to her. Salvador looked at her, not sternly, but tiredly, and asked, "Is there something you want to tell me, Natalia?" The girl shook her head. "Seems like not. So, what's the matter? Are you mad that I brought a child to your house?" "Not really," the man muttered, not even glancing at Adrian. "Just that every day there are new and interesting rumors about you." "I told Salvador that you took the laptop from Nathan's room," Victoria said happily, "and ran away with it from the house. Can you explain what that means?" Natalia was ready to laugh with relief and was about to answer, but Sancho spoke first. "I'll explain," he said, entering his father's office and standing next to Natalia. He looked seriously at Salvador and said, "Dad, this girl used to be Nathan's fiancée, and her son is your grandson. If you don't believe me, look at the boy yourself. He looks like my brother and your son." Victoria looked shocked, as if she had been doused with a bucket of water. Natalia looked at Sancho in amazement. "How did you find out?" she whispered. "From the laptop," Sancho replied. "More specifically, from the photos I found on it. There was a huge archive, and I was digging through it yesterday after I read the report. I wanted to calm my nerves, but ended up getting even more shocked. You were the girl with the scratched knee. And how didn't I recognize you right away?" They looked at Salvador, waiting for him to say something. The man was looking at Adrian, and tears were slowly rolling down his cheeks. "He looks like Nathan as a child," whispered Salvador. "He's the spitting image of him." Everything ended well. Victoria resigned on the same day, not wanting to stay in a house where, as she put it, everyone was against her. Salvador didn't want to part with his grandson and kept asking Natalia questions about how she had been living all these years. Of course, Natalia didn't stay on as their housekeeper. In the beginning, she was a good friend of the family, and Salvador called her his daughter. A year later, she married Sancho. The young couple fit together well. They were serious and calm. A year after that, Natalia gave birth to Sancho's daughter. Sometimes, she fondly remembered her first love, but she kept moving forward because life, no matter what, flows smoothly ahead. And ahead of their family, many happy years await.
If you're enjoying it as well, leave a like and subscribe to the channel.